Hey everybody, it's Michael at the Abundant Yogi, and today we have a wonderful guest. We've had another live before, Chris Kendall, the Raw Advantage. So, okay,
How's it going, brother?
very good yourself, brother.
Doing very, very good. This light's blinding me a teeny bit, though. I'm going to turn it down just a smidge. There we go.
Okay, quite the haul you picked up at the market.
Yes, I did. I got a really nice one, and I even went back there again today and grabbed a little bit of extra things, and some stuff got even cheaper. Crazy. Those cherry tomatoes, they went down to $1.50 for the 3 kilograms. So
Now, is
got some
that
more of
one
those.
dollar or like €1?
Well, it's fairly close, but they were yesterday. They were about 200 sec, which is roughly around $2, and today they were 150 sec, which is probably like a dollar forty
Wow,
six or something.
that's a great haul, man. Great haul. So,
Yeah.
for those of you who are joining today, I'm my guest is Chris Kendall, who is at the Raw Advantage. I dare say we could call him the Kendallizer. Um, I
I
couldn't.
prefer the Great Candellini.
Oh, I like that too. That works as well, depending on what audience we're talking
Yeah.
about. Um, Chris is a writer. He is. Hang on. Okay, so he's a 21-year raw foodist.
Yeah.
Following the 80-10-10, we'll get into that in a bit. He is a professional skateboarder with a big announcement that his original first skateboard is now in the Museum of Saskatchewan, which
Yeah.
kudos to you, brother.
Well,
So professional
just for
skateboarder.
clarity, just clarity briefly though, it's not my first like board, but it's the first board I ever rode when I was a
No,
kid.
yeah,
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 I think that's phenomenal.
yeah.
Absolutely. He's a yogi, spiritual background. He's into, all sorts of great things. He's a chef. I mean, we could go on and on. He's known for his Kendallizing of some of these raw recipes, which is why I think that the name the Kendallizer would be great. He's an author, which is where we're going to kind of go today.
Yeah.
And is there anything you wanted to add to that
No,
thought, Chris?
no, brother. I feel gassed up already, so that feels good.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. From the writing perspective, and I thought about this the other day because I was seeing a YouTube thing that you'd done with Dr. Doug Graham,
Yeah.
and we was talking about sort of passing the torch. Now, have you written stuff with Doug?
You know, I do have a book called American Classics, which was co-authored with me and Ashley Clark and the help of Dr. Graham, and is a food and sport recipe book based on like American favorites, which is a little bit loosely American favorites because I have some stuff that's a little bit off key there. But that is one book that we have done together. And other than that, there's a teeny picture of me on the cover of one of his books, but otherwise I haven't co-written. I have got him to do some like foreword or like a
Yeah.
nice quote in one of my books, stuff like that. But we haven't done much in terms of information-based products. I can say that actually this book that I recently did, the
Yeah.
Raw Truths, was really my first like full length book that isn't recipe based. Like I have others that my Banana Commanders Banana Handbook. There's a
Right.
lot of information, but there's still a lot of recipes, and
Yeah. Yeah.
this Raw Truths is the first that's like just straight, just information and more than 10 pages. Because I've done others that are like 10 pages or less.
So, having said that, have you ever thought of doing kind of sort of an appendage to Doug's 80-10-10 thing, or like a larger kind of larger writing format book than the what you've done so far? Is that something that perhaps is in the future?
I haven't thought too much of it. Snoo wants to say hello here.
Hey,
She's
Stu.
Make sure she doesn't hang up on us though, because her nose is pretty close to that spot. Um, I have thought about it to some extent, but it isn't something that is perking me too much right now. It's one of those things like, I mean, I really think 80-10-10 is amazing as is, and there could be like an annotated version with like extra comments and stuff like that.
Right.
But it'd be an interesting discussion with Dr. Graham, but I think he puts stuff in such an amazing way. I just feel really blessed to be able to, apply it and share some of my own little insights through videos and stuff like that, at least at this point.
Okay. Should we just put this in context of who Doug is very quickly?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, So Dr. Doug Graham, yeah, I was like, which one of us? No, so I mean, from my learning, like I met Dr. Doug Graham in 2004 when I was going to school to become a holistic nutritionist. And at that time, I didn't really know much about him before that. But at that point, he had already been a raw fooder and an educator and a doctor of chiropractic. Raw food for, I think at that time he said over like 23 or 25 years at that time. So he's, now like close to 50 years raw, somewhere in there, 40s years, in his high 40s, I believe. Um, and yeah, he hadn't written the 80-10-10 diet at that point, but he had written oh gosh, a whole bunch of different nutrition and athletic performance, a book on fasting, grain damage, and I soaked up a bunch of that material. But he's been in the game for a long, long time and is now considered one of the main pioneers or even father of a low-fat, fruit-based raw
Right.
food diet because the majority of raw food teachers didn't really go too much into the nuance of the nutrition, just kind of as much raw as you can. And, a lot of fat was very, very common. In fact, low fat was really uncommon.
Hmm.
And he just kind of looked at it with a bit more of a pragmatic view, looking into sports science, the available nutritional science, the animals that are the closest to us, and just what is working in nature and just in general in the health sphere. And low fat, high carbohydrate just kept on jumping up as again, what nature provides, the animal closest to us, sports science, nutritional science really shone a light on. And he applied it to a raw food diet with amazing results and refined it and, made the science really make sense for a wider crowd and put it all together. And that's what he's really been championing and helping tons and tons of people with. And I really feel blessed to have met him in 2004 because I'll admit I already was on the road of high carbohydrate, low fat, high raw, but I didn't totally understand it and the fear of fruit and stuff like that. And since 2004, after meeting him, I've been doing it full time, and now he's a good friend and mentor and colleague. So it's
That's fantastic.
amazing.
Yeah, that's a great story. For anybody who's interested in learning more about Chris's history, if you want to check out the previous live I did, because we talk about where Chris has come from, what he's done, and all the rest, you can check on it. Because the purpose of, well, purpose other than getting together today is to talk about a few things, and they're in the writing context. So
Yeah.
you just completed a book recently,
Yeah.
the myths, the myth busters, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
give the whole a title, but it's really a very interesting book with respect to misconceptions, I would say, and myths that are out there with respect to living a raw, low fat, high vegan, raw,
Mhm.
vegan, low fat lifestyle. I had
Mhm.
to pause to get that out. So, do you want to? Let's start with why did you feel now is the time to kind of put this out there?
Hmm. I mean, some of these myths have been around for a long time, and they're not necessarily completely specific just to raw fooders, but to anyone in the health sphere. And some of them are ones that I was confused about early on. Also, some of them were ones that I felt very strongly didn't make sense and didn't hold water from even then my background in nutrition. And for the absolute most part, in the last 16 plus years I've been doing this full time, I really just like to showcase things I'm for and make this easier and tastier and more fun and simpler, right? But over the years, through my consultations, as well as just seeing the social media sphere expand and the implications of that, as well as the reasons behind it, I've seen some of these myths cause harm more and more and more and be perpetuated more and more and more and perpetuated widely. And some of them, they're fantastic claims that just really entice people and get more viral, so they hit more people.
All right.
Uh, and some of them just really fit kind of wishful thinking or misconceptions, But again, really, most of them they're topics that I researched more and more the more I found them to be problematic with people I've been consulting and seeing in the community. And I felt like it was just a time to really start putting them out. In fact, I started kind of putting out videos a little bit more controversial
Yes.
in nature more than a few years ago, and I had a whole host of them on the back burner. But I don't truthfully love being super controversial, nor all the drama that comes up with it.
Mhm.
The last thing I'd want to be is divisive in the community, which is already a small community. So I had some hesitancy in doing so, and I slowly came out with some on video. But I still have a backlog of topics I want to come out with. And then with the last bundle and some technological failures for the project I actually really planned on having launched for that bundle, I
Right.
kind of got forced into a position where I was like, well, either I don't have anything or I come up with something real like within a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
And so I already had some outlines for some of these topics because, like I said, there was a backlog. So I just kind of reformatted that into a book form and also went deeper into some that I didn't even have a backlog for, but I thought conceptually I would eventually. And that's basically what made this book come out, was like just years and years of feeling like these are things that I believe will only benefit the community in the bigger picture, despite maybe some little bit of drama. And otherwise, that I just felt like it was like keeping it in was actually harming me, and I
Right.
didn't want to keep it in longer, even though I wasn't super excited about putting it out in some ways. It was just time.
No, fair enough. I mean, you've mentioned this. I saw you mention it in some of the lives you did with respect to the bundle. I mean,
Yeah,
we all, and I'm including myself here, have fallen into many of these in terms of
yeah,
believing or looking into them, thinking, yeah, that makes sense, or
yeah,
I'm going to jump on board with this, that, and whatever. Right? I think all of us have fallen into that category at one point in time or another, um,
yeah,
which bears to mind, and I believe this emphatically, that honestly, to find out the truth, you have to dig down yourself because there's so
yeah,
much information out there these days. And not to say that it's all bad or all good or whatever, right? But
yeah.
it's up to the individual really to um, take command of their own life and do the research themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And beyond that, to make sure that they don't just get tunnel vision and, fall for confirmation bias, or, that they just trust one or two individuals and assume that everyone else is wrong and lying. And I've seen that a lot, to be honest. There are some people that have commented saying, well, like for example, mucoid plaque, like, well, I've seen it come out, so I know it's the truth, and I would never trust any doctor, and anyone who says otherwise is, just being paid by the medical establishment, and to me, it is a sad world when we will only 100% trust our own personal experience, because then we're foregoing the benefit of learning from people who've been doing stuff, and expertise in things for years and years and years and years, right? And I think it is important, to trust our own instincts and our experiences, but at the same time temper them with the experiences and expertise of others, and not just throw one or the other completely out, but if our personal experience only shows the tail end of an entire picture, I think it's also important to consider, the wider view and experience of those that have the entire picture. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so just our experience can really ring true, but it also can fool us. And history has shown that throughout the years, that people can believe things based on their experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% true. And without having a little bit of an open mind and looking outside of that and doing your own research and testing it and making sure that we're not pigeonholing ourselves, then we're going to get much more well-rounded education and knowledge.
Right. Now, did you get a lot of pushback on this?
I mean, not on the book so far. Actually, the vast, vast majority of people have only said really good things and said like, "Wow, like you've basically saved me from a lot of stress. Like I feel so much more at ease now, and this all makes so much sense. And I wish I would have read this years and years ago. I've heard a lot of that. The mucoid plaque one, I put videos out on that. I've
Yeah.
gotten definitely more pushback from that.
Right.
I mean, the video itself has like 350 comments, and I do my best to reply to absolutely every single one. I'm pretty sure I've replied to every single one. And some of it is definitely digging heels in, and some of it is pushbacks, and some of it is rude. But I understand. Like some of these things people build their identity around. Some of these things people build their businesses around. Some of these things, if you've gone through a really challenging process and done things that are pretty gross, you want to believe it. So anything kind of sharing opposite of that, I understand why people would be resistant. And sadly too, this lifestyle, it does attract a lot of people that are desperate or in a place of really, really intense need, and also a bunch of people that are really into conspiracy. And I believe in conspiracy stuff going on out there,
Yeah.
but there is the predilection for people to then assume, because they've really seen the craziness of mainstream society nutrition, and then their eyes have been opened to like what? Like, you don't have to cook your food, and like, you don't need all these things people are marketing, and that's the cause of disease. Like, I understand why then that can lead to people think that, well, therefore everything's a conspiracy, and anything we can think of that is within that establishment is 100% wrong, and like the devil, right? And I mean, I've talked to people that immediately go there, just like, anything you could say, it doesn't matter because they're all, lying devils, so
Right.
it's yeah, I've gotten a lot from that, but not so much from the book, and I hope to get some more. I mean, I would love to have some people bring up some points or some questions, or to talk. I like debate, but as long as it's intelligent and cordial, and not just name calling and ad hominems and other stuff like that.
Right. No, no. I mean, fair enough. I mean, you touched on a point which is financial, and that particular topic would because there's a very large um, detox community out there, right?
Yeah,
And doing some wonderful things, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so um, and that would touch upon that myth in itself would touch upon some stuff that people are doing with respect to also making a living, and it has a financial component, which is always an interesting thing. And look, not that I think allopathic doctors have done themselves any favors over the last little while, for sure.
yeah.
There's still, I mean, you don't throw the baby with the bathwater either, right? I mean,
Yeah.
hey, I had to have a knee operation, and as you've had to have some stuff done,
Yeah.
I didn't decide to just find some raw guy in the corner to fix that for me.
Yeah. Well, if you know what, actually, though, Michael, if you just start squishing bananas into it every single day for the next 5 days, and they'll go away.
I knew the Kendallizer was going to come out
Yeah, yeah. And you must freeze your broccoli, though, otherwise you just won't get it.
there. So let's talk about the book and some of the myths. Are you into going into to some of them?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's
Okay.
let's let's dive into any of them you like.
Um, the mucoid plaque one's a big one, so I'm going to suggest that somebody look up your video on YouTube at the Raw Advantage on YouTube, because it is really the place you should go. It's informative. It's with a doctor. You're bringing out facts and all the rest. So I think with respect to mucoid plaque, definitely get we'll talk about how you can get Chris's ebook, but I would say with respect to that, go see the YouTube you did on that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree. And I'd just like to add as well, because, some people might dismiss it as soon as you said there's a doctor involved. But the doctors involved, they're also like really, really well educated, either fasting experts or raw
Right.
foodists, like such as Dr. Graham and,
Yeah.
Dr. Arelli, who's a high raw vegan, and then Dr. Alan Goldhammer, who has probably water fasted, like supervised water fasted more than anyone on the planet today, like over 40,000 people at True North Health Center. So they're not just going to the clinic over here and asking them their thoughts.
No, we love Dr. Goldhammer. My partner Julie
Yeah,
went and did a 21-day water fast with him.
he's great. Yeah, he's great. He's super entertaining. Soon I'm going to be launching the full interview from the. I took excerpts from our full interview. So yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I'd encourage anyone to check out that whole video on the blog post.
Yeah. Okay. So with respect to the book, I am going to pick out a few, if you don't mind. Right.
Yep. Yep.
One of them is I thought we talked about the fat myth, the fruitarian myth, and then
Hmm.
you can pick another one. I
Okay.
wanted to ask you a question before we got into the fat myth.
Yeah.
I think it can fit into this category. I've often been told or read that one should not mix fats with fruits.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
And I specifically want to deal with three items, being chia seed, flaxseed, and hemp seed, right?
Yeah.
Because I add them to a smoothie. I think you add them to a smoothie at times or whatever, right? So what's the story with that? And then we can get into the fat myth in general.
Yeah, no, and yeah, that's a good prelude, because the fat myth can go in multiple directions for sure. And with the idea of combining fat and fruit, I mean, I think the first place to start with that is food combining, and its origins in general, right?
Yeah.
Because I know for myself, when I first started learning about food combining in 1999, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I saw it as a set of rules that were like
Mhm.
infallible, black and white, very clearly defined, and just like, this is it. If you do this exactly, then you'll reach peak health, basically, right?
Right.
And I think it's important to note that the concept of food combining actually was originated for the means of weight loss. It wasn't originated for digestion specifically,
Oh.
but by limiting the amounts of foods you mix in one setting and also making it so you have one concentrated food in one setting. That's why typically, especially with cooked food, it's like, either you have a protein-based meal or you have a starch-based meal. You don't have both, right, at the same
Mhm.
time. It makes the meals more calorically dilute or less calorically dense, right? Surrounding them by lots of veggies and making things simple. Now, there definitely are physiological truths to the different places that our body secretes different digestive enzymes and their efficiency when you mix certain things. And a very simple classic example of that is, our mouth secretes salivary amylase, which is
Yeah.
responsible for breaking down carbohydrates. But if you start by eating, say, lemons, that acid in your mouth inhibits the secretion of the salivary amylase. So if you're eating, like French fries, for example, for someone eating French fries with lemon juice or vinegar on top, or even ketchup with has the acid in it, then your salivary amylase, which is building up in my mouth. Wow, that's weird. But it will be lessened, right? It'll be lessened. So the first step of that carbohydrate digestion is vastly reduced in terms of the enzymatic production.
Mhm, mhm.
And you do produce more lower down, but it just basically means that you're going to get less for more effort. It's likely going to take more. There's likely more chance of fermentation and less efficient digestion. And the busier meals get, the worse that is. Now, with fat and sweet fruit, I don't know of any implications on the enzyme production, but
Mm.
what is often touted about, and does make sense for sure, and it's kind of funny because depending upon who you ask, this can be seen as a positive or a negative, and I'll get into that later. But when we eat fruit, it takes very little time in the stomach. The water is going to be absorbed quite quickly, the sugars are absorbed quite quickly, and then it passes from the stomach into the lower or into the intestines.
Mhm.
And fat, on the other hand, does take a longer time in the stomach. We're talking like, 15, 20 minutes for fruit, depending on the size and what you're actually eating. Some can be less, some can be more. Whereas fat can take hours in the stomach before the gastric emptying into the intestinal tract. And a lot of that digestion is actually going down in, like, the fat digestion is going down in the intestines, whereas the protein component is going on a little bit more in the stomach with HCl and hydrochloric
Mhm.
acid. So the idea is fruit being something that wants to move through the body quickly. When you mix it with fat, it gets held up in the stomach and isn't as efficiently digested, leading to more chance of it fermenting and causing byproducts that aren't really desirable. Now, while I do think that this, in the extreme case, is absolutely true, and if somebody has blood sugar issues, it's probably wise to minimize, or altogether avoid sweet fruit and fat combinations.
Mhm.
Not all fruits are the same, and it has been found that mixing with things like acid fruits can actually help emulsify fat in the system, and that's why a lot of food combining charts recommend, mixing a fat with a acid fruit like lemon, lime, pineapple, kiwi, all those kind of good ones, orange,
Right.
for a really tasty dressing, but also because the benefits of each food can have benefits in terms of the absorption and the digestion of the fats themselves. Now, when we mix it with dense sweet fruits, though, so a classic example is like trail mix, like, so you get fat like nuts and raisins together, and some people say, well, this is actually good because it holds up the fruit in the stomach and it slows down the absorption of the sugar, right? Because they're
Mm.
really afraid of sugar spikes. So they reason it in the sense of, well, then instead of having, blood sugar rise and then fall, it just stays kind of like here for a long period of time while the stomach is working on the fats, right? Whereas, people like Mastering Diabetes, Robbie and Cyrus at Mastering Diabetes, or Dr. Doug Graham, they would go more into the concept that, when you eat fruit on an empty stomach, it does cause a bit more of a rise and drop, but this is actually a healthy response. And in terms of our digestion and physiology, is totally natural and normal and advantageous. Whereas instead, when we're consuming it with a bunch of fat, what this does is it also, beyond holding it up in the stomach, it impacts and impedes insulin function. So we're going to get higher levels of blood sugar for a longer period of time while the body is trying to usher it out with the insulin function. So That's kind of going over both of those. Now, kind of going back to how I used to think that food combining was a black and white scenario of good, bad, like perfect digestion, horrible digestion. There is nuance there. And while we like to put things in boxes and make them definitive, things aren't always definitive. And while again, I would mention if somebody has blood sugar issues, then it may be wise to utilize this concept and limit the mixing of sweet fruits and fats, at least not do it all the time. The idea that doing it automatically ends up in really negative digestion or blood sugar issues is a little bit of a misnomer and not quite black and white. We can take as a consideration durian, which is a sweet fruit and is a fatty fruit at the same time. And I don't hear anyone saying, well, don't eat durian then because it mixes sweet and fat, right?
Right.
Um,
Interesting.
what often comes into play here are amounts. So
I was going to
it's the
say,
same. Yeah,
sorry,
because
I was going to say quantity probably has something to do with this as well.
absolutely. Quantity has something to do with it. Our metabolic health has something to do with it. Even our fitness level, the fitter we are, the more robust our insulin function is, or the sharper our insulin function is. So for example, somebody who's really sick, has poor digestion and isn't active at all, will have a harder time mixing fat and fruits. Somebody who has been living a low-fat raw food diet for a period of time, or just a low-fat diet in general, is fairly fit and athletic and stuff like that, is likely going to have little to no issue, especially if it's once in a while. Now, maybe if they do it every single day, it might cause issues. But in the concept of a raw food approach, it's going to be much less problematic than, say, mixing two processed things like a processed sugar and processed fat, which basically all junk food has out there, right? Like
Right.
processed sugar and oils, right? So
Yeah.
in the concept of a raw food diet, it's not quite as big of an issue. Now, like you did say too, there amounts come into play. So, with durian being anywhere from like 15 to 20, 25% fat, I kind of look at that as a kind of an okay window. People notice that durian digests slower than just eating a banana smoothie, and
Hmm.
that's usually brought up by durian burps. It's one of the few burps that I don't mind because you get a little bit of an extra flavor reminder, right?
Right.
But but it isn't quite as easy to digest. And I would basically say the same thing. Like if I'm making a mango-based dressing, and I want it to be a little bit extra creamy, adding a tablespoon or two of hemp or chia or flax, which are my preferred ones, I find still digests amazingly well. And most of the time when I'm making that, I'm coupling it with vegetables anyway, which digest a little bit slower, have the fiber content and all that other good stuff, which makes the digestion, slower anyway, rather than just having mangoes by themselves.
So you're saying by adding like the leafy greens into that smoothie or whatever, that it's helping with the absorption of the fat?
Well, in some ways, it's not that it's, what's the best way to say? I mean, one thing, the mangoes with the vegetables is actually going to enhance the absorption of the nutrients in the greens.
Right.
And the little bit of added fat also helps the absorption of some of the nutrients in the greens as well.
Oh, okay.
And it's going to slow it all down a little bit. But in the concept of, like fruit, vegetables, then fat, you're kind of reaching that middle ground where it's not as fast as fruit. It's probably not going to be quite as long as just a huge meal of fat by itself. But
Right.
having a little bit of fat with the vegetables and the fruit is going to be closer to the fruit and vegetables with a little bit slower with that fat. And
Okay.
again, quantity comes into play. If I did like a cup of cashews with my sauce compared to again a couple tablespoons of hemp and chia, um, and then going even further, like I make a banana smoothie today. Actually, I had what did I have today? Was it banana? Yeah. I had a banana smoothie with about a tablespoon of hemp seeds in it. And
Hmm.
again, if I made a banana smoothie that calorically was half fat and half sweet fruit, I'm sure I'd be burping and it wouldn't
Sure.
feel very good. Whereas
Right.
having, like 100 calories with my 1400 calories, so it's like 7% fat, something like that.
Mm.
I haven't ever noticed any difference besides maybe feeling like it digested a teeny bit slower. But what a lot of people don't actually recognize is a lot of tropical fruits are naturally higher in omega fatty acids. And that is one reason too why, when we get into fruitarian myth and stuff like that, if you wanted to succeed or do your best on that kind of approach, you want to be eating more tropical fruits that have a higher fatty acid profile because most temperate fruits or even subtropical fruits, stone fruits, they're much lower in the omegas.
Mhm.
And if you're subsiding all off that and not eating any nuts and seeds at all, which some people they won't for philosophical reasons, then you can actually run into essential fatty acid deficiency issues and symptoms from that, right?
Mhm.
So all of this to basically say that some people's argument is if you're not solely eating, fattier fruits and getting durian more often and, eating lots of mangoes and papayas and, ackee and all these other tropical fruits, then it's to your advantage actually to add small amounts of fats to your diet, whether that be adding it to some fruits that maybe aren't quite as fatty or to your dinner meals with salads and greens that
Right.
still can include fruit, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, all this again to say, like, I don't look at it as a black and white thing. I'm not encouraging people to mix huge amounts of fats with huge amounts of sweet fruits. But at the same time, I wouldn't be worried about having trail mix once a year when I'm on the trail and going, oh my gosh, it's like nuts and raisins. I'm going to have a diabetic shock, like,
Right. Right.
that's not going to happen. We like to make things really like simple in boxes and dramatic. It's more viral, but the reality is a little bit more nuanced, and it's what we do most of the time has the most pronounced effect. And for myself, I'm not worried about having some fat with my fruits, but I wouldn't necessarily have huge amounts every single day.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on with respect to the fat myth, that chapter? As you go
Well,
through?
I mean, I'll just briefly say because a big part of that chapter is kind of going into what I mentioned a little bit. I mean, Dr. Graham, he really, really knocks the ball out of the park about the other side of the fat myth, basically saying like, more fat is better, and it's better to eat fat than fruit,
Right.
and get most of your calories from fat, which isn't upheld by nutritional science, by sports science, by, the animals that are closest to us and what they do in nature, nor even nature's availability, because fats are available seasonally, and typically late fall, early winter, and I mean, unless we're storing them and putting them into jars and keeping them fresh all year round, I mean, it's not really that practical. We've made it practical these days with worldwide shipping. But anyways, he covers that very well. I touch upon that in the book. The other angle of that is the thought that, well, if low fat is good, then no fat is better, which we have a definitive need for fat. And again, if you're eating mostly tropical fruits and including some fatty fruits and stuff like that, you're going to be doing all right. But the idea of eating a strictly no fat diet, so like no avocados, no durians, no nuts and seeds, um, and if you consume them, no oils. In the long term, it's not really shown to be advantageous, and on the other side can lead to insufficiencies and symptoms and, less robust health in the long term. A couple days, weeks, even some months here and there, seasonally, or just if you're enjoying the good quality fruit of the summer and stuff like that. Some people find benefits as streamlining digestion and feeling lighter and more energized. But in the bigger picture of longer term months and years and decades, I haven't seen anything, nor has any other long-term raw foodist that I feel blessed to have really conferred with on stuff like this. They haven't seen that to be advantageous and actually really to one's detriment. So that's the other kind
Yeah.
of aspect.
I think I was listening to another thing that Doug was talking about, Dr. Graham, was that one of the reasons that many people fall off of being raw, right,
Yeah.
is because they've been too high fat,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
becomes unsustainable. They don't their health begins to suffer, and they go, oh, this raw thing is this raw thing was a thing that doesn't work, right? But it was
Yeah.
really the high fat. Just to respond to Patty, yes, this video will be saved on my Instagram and perhaps on Chris's as well, so you can see the whole thing later if you like.
Yeah.
Um, what was I? Okay, so I think we sort of covered that off.
Yep.
If you're good with that, I think we got some time because there's some other things that I'd like to talk about that you have upcoming. So I want to save some time for that. Let's just touch upon the fruitarian myth.
Yes. Yeah. So, and this is one of those other touchy ones too, where like I have no desire to create any division or to think, people to think that I'm against fruitarians, or if you want to be a fruitarian, it can be doable. I know fruitarians, but I also know far, far more people who have attempted a fruitarian diet and had horrible health outcomes compared to people who have attempted a raw food diet and had poor health outcomes. And I know some people could argue, well, some people have a hard time with, a regular raw food diet, so it's a non sequitur. But when we're talking about the amount of numbers and also the nutritional reality, as well as just looking into the science of nutrition and our physiology and anatomy and the animals closest to us, I feel very confident upon why I share this, because just like I said with mucoid plaque, I've seen people harmed and hindered and lose teeth and lose hair and not experience the robust health or advantages of the raw food diet that they could through applying a fruitarian diet based on philosophy. And that's kind of one of the key points of this chapter, is that the appeal to a fruitarian diet is really based more in philosophy rather than sound logic and known nutritional science and anatomy and physiology. It sounds really damn good because, it's like, well, fruit is the only freely given food. It's as close as you can get to our perfect food. It's delicious. It's juicy. It's much more easy to eat. Kids are attracted to it, and because it's as close as it can get to our perfect food, you can do well on it. And I would say if you were restricted to only one food forever, maybe fruit would be the best choice. But it doesn't mean that it's the best choice to, by choice, exclude all other foods entirely. Uh, in the chapter, I go into what I consider an important point is definitions, and not only the very clear definition, but what the widest view definition is as well, right? So, um, technically, a fruitarian is someone who only eats fruit, and even more technically, that can include both, that can include the botanary view of what fruit is. So, a lot of people who would just hear the idea of fruitarian, they might just think only fruit, only sweet fruit, so like just the ones you see in the fruit section of the shopping center, right? Or in a kitchen.
Yep.
Whereas botanically, fruit can go into a much wider group of foods, like you can actually consider almonds fruit, technically, you can consider, I mean, not even technically, cucumbers, tomatoes,
Right.
zucchinis, bell peppers, okra, all these things are fruit, right? And if you have that wider kind of view and you include, substantial amounts of those foods as well, yeah, you can do it. You can do a fruitarian diet, but I haven't seen any example of it being better than. And again, when we go to our physiology and anatomy, no one describes us as frugivores. Instead, we're described as, sorry, as not as fruitarians, but instead we're described as frugivores.
Right.
And our closest genetic cousins, or whatever you want to say, ancestors, however you want to put it, right? The animals that are the closest to us,
Mhm.
they are frugivorous. And when you look to the other primates, there are no fruitarian examples. That they just aren't out there, right? And um, it is often a self-perpetuated kind of cycle based on philosophy that, if you eat really light and just fruit, yeah, you feel light, you feel really good. And if you do that for long enough and then you try and eat something else, you don't feel like you enjoy it. It doesn't digest well. You might get burps, you might get indigestion. And then often that is taken as, well, of course, those aren't our foods. We shouldn't eat them. So fruitarian is the way, right?
Mhm.
And this can be a really slippery slope that, coupled with the kind of the less is more that I talk about in another chapter, can really lead people down a path of eating lighter and lighter and lighter and mistaking their inability to digest heavier foods well to be the indication that they're just not meant for us then, instead of really recognizing that our body adapts and changes based on what we give it. And if we don't eat any greens, well, our hydrochloric acid in our stomach, which is responsible for protein digestion and digestion in and of itself, efficient digestion, also from keeping bacteria in check and keeping our microbial balance in check, so we're less resistant, or more resistant rather, to pathogens and outside virus or influences and stuff like that, however you want to believe it. Um, if you include those foods in small amounts, progressively more and more, all of those things build up. And there are many, many benefits to having adequate levels of those things, right? So, um, yeah, in relation to what you really want to showcase in terms of this myth, what else would you like to kind of go into? Because
No, I think that you brought up an interesting point because language and how we've perceived language or how we've defined things, perhaps historically within our lifetime, has an impact, right? So,
huge.
so the things that you mentioned, like cucumbers, tomatoes, all aceted things that people are technically fruits, but 99.9% of the population would call them vegetables.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So therefore, even though if you're eating all those things as a fruitarian, technically you're a fruitarian, but in terms of our common knowledge, you're eating vegetables,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting point. I also think it's sort of. Have you ever read any of Hotema's stuff?
A little bit, and I've heard
Mind,
people talk about it,
yeah, all
but
that.
I'm not super well versed in it.
Right. So, I mean, one of the premises he has is that we were all originally, this is like at the beginning of time, a breatharian,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
I have no argument. I have no argument if somebody wants to go down that path. That's, everybody's choice is their own, right? But
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
we're talking, and even he says that was way back when the air was the purest, right? Well,
Yeah.
we no longer live in those times, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's often about how you contextualize
For
stuff,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, unless there's something else that you wanted to add in there, but I did want to. Is there anything else you wanted to add with respect to that?
Yeah, I might as well. I mean, to me, the biggest points are that, the idea of a fruitarian approach is really based more on philosophy. And I mean, when we're talking about Hilton and going even further back in suppositions, I mean, to me, the quality of evidence for that is very low. So it's again, this is kind of like it's like a very neat idea, and it's hard to disprove, but it's even harder to prove.
Right.
And for me, when I'm looking at real world outcomes and I'm looking at what is being proposed as optimal and accessible to in a large body of people, and really considering known nutritional science and, the application of this. Because it's not like, I'm just saying like, oh, well, like I heard a fruitarian had a problem. Like I'm going over 16 years of coaching well over hundreds of people, talking with other people like Dr. Graham, who's been doing this for 40 plus, years and consulting thousands of people, traveling the world and meeting people who are applying different ways of doing a raw food diet. And to me, it all comes down to all of us really have seen people have a much harder line, walking a finer line with more cause for potential detriment and insufficiencies and low body mass, low muscle mass, less robust health, just poorer health outcomes, and so it's like we can live a philosophy, but at some point, we pay the price if that philosophy isn't sound, and that's kind of what I'm trying to point to, because even like Ann Osborne, she's one of the most well-known fruitarians out there. She's a close friend. I really love Ann. She's amazing. But she even says like, if you're going to do this fruitarian thing, well, you want to be as close to the best quality fruit as possible. Like, she lives on her land and eats fruit fresh from the tree, and does her best to eat mostly tropical, organic, live a low stress lifestyle. Because, the way I look at it, this kind of rounds it out a little bit too. The more stressors we are in our life, so whether that's mental emotional stress, whether that's environmental stress, whether that's a stress from not getting the best quality food possible, any number of stresses we add up, we have a heightened need for alkalinity, and vegetables are the most alkaline foods out there. So again, yeah, if we're a yogi living in the tropics, meditating most of the day, and living really, really clean and simple and eating the best quality fruits, then you can do much better on a fruitarian diet than if you're living in a city eating subpar fruits with lots of stressors, detoxifying from the last, 25 years of your regular lifestyle. You're new to this. You're going to have a much harder time, and you're going to probably see more issues, because if you're not eating that alkaline matter, you're not eating more greens, your body's got to buffer out those acids somehow, and eventually you run out of stored alkalinity in your bones, and it can cause things to go awry, right? And I've seen that happen far, far too often. And I see zero indication, again, that it's a a better plan in any stretch of the word. And in fact, I really contend the opposite, that we only gain advantages from having a bunch of vegetables included with a very fruit-centric diet. So I'm definitely not anti-fruit. It's just I don't see advantages to excluding all other food groups and just eating fruit, even if we understand the botanical definition.
Right. No, I'm absolutely, and I think that you brought up a point of geography, right?
We have a funny question. I
Which was that?
apologize.
Which,
Can you touch on blood type? And I, I just would like to touch on that
go
really
for it.
quickly if I
Yeah,
can. Yeah. So
please. Absolutely.
I mean, it's kind of funny because it kind of goes into that virality and goes into the sensational kind of claims and stuff that I mentioned earlier. The blood type diet, eat right for your blood type, came out and sold amazingly, because it told certain groups of people good things about their bad habits. And, it basically says, like, if you're a type O, you're like super alpha hunter and you do best on all meat. And, if you're like an AB, I can't remember, or maybe A negative, I can't remember which one it is, then you're maybe more well suited to being a lame vegetarian that should just lay down and not do much activity. And it's like it's kind of funny because they put out this book, but there's no science behind it. Like none. Like there's tons of animals that have multiple blood types. If I'm not mistaken, all different animals have different blood types, and none of them yet have different types of diets. And again, there's no science around it. So while people will uphold it and like tout it super high because they saw a result, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, just relying only on personal experience, right?
Yeah.
People see results, but it's not because of the blood type diet, it's because they're simplifying their diet and they're eating more whole foods and they're, eating less crap. It's like health is often as much about what you're not eating as what you're eating. So it doesn't hold up to scientific scrutiny whatsoever. There's no example for it in nature, and the results are just based on cleaning up your diet, not because of the blood type idea being right. So I just wanted to quickly say that.
No, I think it's a fair comment. I wanted to comment on two things. One, Chris and
Mhm.
I aren't dissing on anybody's choices, right? I mean, everybody
Oh yeah,
has their ability to make whatever choice they want to make. With respect to diet books, it is the most unregulated aspect of books out there. You
yeah,
can say whatever you want with respect to diet books, right?
yeah,
So to your point, whether they're based in science or not is, again, do your research, I guess. Uh,
yeah,
having said that, I want to move into, because Chris has got a lot of things going on, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
he's a very busy guy at doing lots of stuff. So outside of all of the coaching, consultation stuff that he offers on an ongoing basis, and we'll touch upon that at the very end of this, he's relaunching his Raw Vegan Lifestyle Success System, which is a relaunch, right?
yes, yep.
And it's a 10-week course. I know you're very excited about it. So do you want to give a little overview of this? Is starting in June, right? June 15th, I think it is.
Yeah, yeah. Blessed by you bringing that up for sure. This is my first time relaunching it in since 2021. I actually created it in 2019 after the motorcycle accident, as I wasn't as active out doing things. I was like, now is the perfect time to settle down and make a course that I've been thinking about for a long, long period of time. So it's called the Raw Vegan Lifestyle Success System. It's launching for the first time as a group course on June 15th. And special plug, I am offering a 50% discount, which is the biggest discount that I am offering widely with the code 50 off. But it's a holistic based course, and we didn't really mention that too much. But my background is in holistic nutrition. I'm well versed in natural hygiene and health and fitness and recovery because of my life and lifestyle, fitness, all that good stuff. And I try and really tie all of that together, not only with my intellectual learning, but with my individual experience, and also all I've gleaned from being mentored by Dr. Graham, and also going through courses with Dr. Rick and Karen Dina of Raw Food Education, and other people like Don Bennett. But the course is 10 weeks. It is on a portal called the Experientify portal. And the fun thing about that, and one of the reasons why I chose them, is because it's more of an experience platform where you're doing things, you get rewards when you complete actions. There's even like little celebrations on screen, and it's not just like a quiz where you just like listen and take a quiz. It actually promotes some form of like excitement to complete tasks, and also you earn points which when you complete tasks and, there are like homeworks to drive points home, you
Mm-hmm.
complete those and you get points that can actually be utilized for other recipe books or t-shirts or anything else in my shop. So if you actually complete exactly just like that, or even these guys, but so if you actually complete the whole course, which I'm really stoked to say, I have like way above industry standard for courses completion of my course. A lot of courses only have like a 10 to 15% completion rate, which is kind of sad and scary. Whereas my analytics indicate that I have higher than 80% of people who have taken it complete the whole thing,
Oh,
and which is again way higher than industry standard. But the five modules, because each module is 2 weeks over the 10-week course,
mm-hmm.
and it includes, I bumped it up. This time it includes 12 Zoom calls live, which are group Zoom calls, so you can benefit from questions and answers of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And those will be recorded as well. And some of those are after the course too. Like I mentioned, the modules are 10 weeks, but for 3 months you get the calls to kind of tie it together longer. But module one is all about physicality. So we're talking about the food, we're talking about shopping, we're talking about, all that good kind of stuff, some nutrition. And then module two is more about emotions. So we're going into the emotional aspects, which is often misunderstood and is a really huge
I was
component,
going to say
you know
super, super key component.
super key component. That's why it's really front loaded, and it is tried to be in a format that, you start with the very practical things, and then you start getting into the emotional stuff, and then we start getting into the social stuff, because that's another really big
Yeah,
challenging sticky
yeah.
point for a lot of people. And then we go into the spiritual aspects, and we dive deep into that, and it has some yoga actually, and has a bunch of other fun stuff. And then the fifth is balance with intellect. So that goes into the deeper understanding that maybe isn't totally necessary in week one, but really ties it together and pins down longer term nutritional aspects, and a whole bunch of good stuff like that. And there are other bonuses, like all of my 4 meal plans, which is like a $80 value by itself. My two major recipe books, 101 Frickin' Rawesome Recipes and Tierra Retreat Treats, as well as the Raw Truths mentioned previously, is all in there. So, and there's also 90-day no risk guarantee. So if you go through the whole course and you actually do the course, so like you do the action steps and you don't feel like it was useful for you, you can just send me all that. I'll check it over. And, as long as you didn't just write like, you're just shooting spitballs, if you actually tried to do stuff you don't find as helpful, when you can get a full refund or free coaching to get you to your goals.
That's an incredible bargain.
Yeah, it's a great deal. I know that I could charge more, but I mean, my whole model is based on making this effective and affordable for people. But there is also like everything I could think of tied together in a video format that you have for life that you can go over, that again has action steps and handouts and workbooks that make these points driven home, because just knowing the intellectual aspect is just one part, and actually applying it and having support brings it to an entire next level.
That's a great ongoing resource.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And so if I add anything to it, which I mean, just this time I added my Raw Truths book, and
Right. Yeah.
so then you get those updates, because I don't anticipate ever letting go of this course, so I anticipate adding more things to it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Great stuff. Very good. Okay, so Chris, we're going to bring this in under about 55 minutes, so this is great.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, uh, thanks again for taking all the time, sharing your expertise, your knowledge. I mean, I think your passion is what comes through, and that the passion is from a place of being completely genuine, and which is one of the things I appreciate about you the most. Um, so, if you're interested in finding out all about all of these things that Chris is offering, you can find him on Instagram at the Raw Advantage. You can find him on YouTube at the Raw Advantage. All the links are listed there in his links of the retreat and the course and his consultations. Great T-shirts,
Love
recipe
it, love
books,
it.
books, all sorts of stuff. So check them out. And it's been an absolute pleasure again, brother. Thank you so much. And I'll leave it up to you to give us some final insights.
Well, firstly, I just want to thank you, brother. Really appreciate the conversation and you inviting me on. It's definitely a mutual pleasure as well. And I got to get you back on mine. And I hope that you're all right with this living on my Instagram and maybe even on my my website. Um,
Love to anytime.
yeah, yeah. Super blessed by that for sure. And for giving me the space to share these things because I have shared about the success system and the 50% off, but time is ticking and I'm not the absolute best promoter ever, so I really appreciate that plug as well as for the retreat because although I didn't totally forget about it, I never thought about it right now to promote it. So, yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I just think it's important to get this stuff out there, right? Just get it out,
Yeah,
and people make their choice. And it's like, it's I live my life on one thing. Kindness doesn't cost a thing.
no, yeah, it's
It
true.
just doesn't, right? And
Yeah,
pay it forward because this is what to me it's a key component to living a nice and healthy life.
110%, and it's kind of funny because I mean, you can tell the passion I have behind this. I wouldn't be doing this for this long if I didn't believe in it. And like, I really 1,000% believe like, the retreat and my course are so valuable and can change people's lives. But also, like, I've been going through a promotional season and I'm almost a little bit promotional burnt out and I feel a little self-conscious about overly promoting to
Fair
people.
enough.
And,
Yeah, yeah.
so, but at the same time, it's so freaking valuable. So I want to be promoting this stuff. So it's in my mind sometimes a little bit of a catch-22. So I just really appreciate that opportunity and you bringing it up too.
My
So
pleasure. And life goes in waves, so it's all great. Hey, listen,
yeah,
again, thanks so much. Check Chris out because not only does he have a wealth of information, but he's just a terrific sense of humor. You're gonna find things that are jovial in his, and many things he puts out there on YouTube and whatever, which I think is fantastic. So listen, Chris, again, thank you so much. Much appreciated, and have a fabulous day with the haul you just got.
thanks, brother. Yeah, I'm gonna have a good one tonight. Much
All right,
love, everyone.
peace
You
out.
too, brother. Have a good one.
Thank you.
You guys.